We understand how quite unregulated the crypto space is in Nigeria, and with that at the back of our mind, and the, let me use this word, gbas that goes on every other market day between crypto startups and the government, is there any legal backing for this new VAT charge as communicated by KuCoin?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I would say currently as an industry, there are minimal clarity, regarding quite a number of things. And, taxes actually even being one of them. With the introduction of the Finance Act in 2023, uh, digital assets, were included in the provision of Section 30 of the Act, which capital gains tax were to apply to. And rightfully so. I mean, being a space that trades volume and there are a lot of financial transactions that go on daily, right? I'm sure the industry is definitely willing to have, the government come in with what can work for the ecosystem in terms of taxation, which capital gains was one of those that they introduced to 10%. With the recent announcement by KuCoin yesterday regarding the 7.5% of VAT that they will be charging, I mean, it's I would say it's something that was expected because VAT generally apply to goods and services provided, to Nigerians or within the Nigerian space. But I mean, you can't rightfully tax, a service that you don't even have regulatory clarity around a certain number of things, right? We have disjointed regulation where there is a lack of coordination within between the main regulators, that primarily being the SEC and TPN, right? So what are we looking at? We have a regulation from the SEC that contradicts what the position of the CBN is, and we have the CBN even restricting the currency transactions being conducted through the traditional financial system. So how can you say you want to tax this thing, this industry that you have failed to basically put out those clear frameworks that would actually put the mind of stakeholders at, right? There are still a number of issues that currently, are still being addressed in space, right? But I think regulation is one of those things. It's more of the situation of putting the cart before the horse, right? I mean, eventually everyone recognizes the fact that there has to be, a clear framework around taxes, of which that isn't even applicable and, available at this time. Even the provision of the act, the Finance Act that was introduced, doesn't even clearly define what is a digital asset, what constitutes that, right? Is it just, are we looking at, those assets that we can regard, as commodities or as securities? Are we saying which of these will the capital gains, apply? Because when you look at capital gains tax, for example, that, let's say, would be on, whatever profit you've made off whatever assets, the gains you've made basically on the assets that you've held for a period of time, right? Now, looking at VAT itself, it's a tax that, is deductible of first instance, from the transaction that is done itself. But you want to even deduct this VAT tax from transactions that you do not even have a clear framework to say this is legitimate or this is how it should be done. But you don't even have a clear monetary framework to even make sure that these taxes that are deducted are what are properly remitted to you, what true records are what are declared to you by these exchanges. So in the long run, I mean, you still have some of these, the regulators will still be blindsided in the long run, especially when there's no clarity around. And it just, in a way, still, it not showing readiness, really, to be honest, because the foundations just have to be laid right. And of course, we understand the government would want to see how it can benefit, the ecosystem in general in terms of boosting the economic prosperity of Nigeria by taxing some of these industries. But you have to have a clear legal framework for some of this, right? You can't keep treating them as if, they are criminals or, it's a dark market, basically, like the former, CBN governor said, back in the day. So, I mean, those days are past. I think more education needs to be, done, for the regulators in this space, but we need, to have proper foundations set.
Yes. So, from what you've mentioned, Laleye, is that this is not illegal, this is not out of place. It is just that you don't have the right framework to make it work, right?
Yes, exactly that. And based on the premise that a lack of regulation in a space, you know, you shouldn't be looking at taxing when there's the regulation isn't just there, the frameworks aren't there, the foundation isn't there, even the taxation, right? There is no clarity um as to the nature of taxes that should apply and which kind of asset it should apply to.
True.
And in my opinion, in a robust ecosystem, encouraging innovation and investment in this sort of areas, nothing stops the regulators, the FIRS from considering probably a VAT exemption for some of these nature of transactions that that are conducted in the space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laleye, for that. I don't know if Chimgodrim has any question, but before he goes, I want to ask this. Yeah. You mentioned that digital assets can indeed be taxed, right? So with that in mind, what are like the digital assets that Nigerians currently use or trade, that you feel that the system or there's a framework around, or there's no framework around any form of taxing digital assets in Nigeria at the moment?
Right. Great question. So I would say, based on existing regulation and what obtains as best practice in the industry, right? So when you have certain assets that are digital assets that are held by individuals or corporate bodies, for the purpose of investment, right? When you have, probably about an asset, worth, let's say, maybe $1,000, right? And over time, holding that particular asset, there is a profit, a capital gain, again on that asset. Probably it rises, up to the point where it's worth probably 1,400. So $400 profit on that, that can be taxed, right? There's a capital gains, tax that would apply to that, right? Which is because that is solely earned for, investment purpose and, profits were made, which, is applicable in, many ecosystems. I mean, you could even have a system, which I think some of that even applies to this finance act, which are able to apply capital losses, right? And you offset it over a period of time. Probably if you make probably losses on those kind of assets, you can probably set off those losses against whatever deductibles that you have, right? So primarily for those purposes, you can have those kind of taxes applying. And for the VAT that was mentioned, right, that is for trading transactions according to what KuCoin is sent out, which I read. The trading transactions that are conducted, in their platform. So as a platform, they have the premise, right, to deduct that at the point of transaction and remit, right? But many things are still unaddressed, right? You don't even have the compliance and monitoring structure yet in place. The necessary tools, the necessary industry collaborations, at this time have not been firmed up. So a lot of things are still yet to be addressed. Monitoring becomes an issue. The exchanges could just declare anything, right? And say, okay, this is the volume that we need within this while. And, all that becomes a challenge. You can't possibly monitor this. The full benefit that you could have had from actually having a coordinated implementation of whatever the current regulations are in place, or whatever reviews are to be done, of which they recently even proposed some new amendments to the SEC rules, right? And not even all assets can be regulated by the SEC, right? Because it's only assets that are securities that fall within the purview of what the SEC can regulate, right? Some assets can be deemed as commodities. So there are a whole lot of things to be addressed, all together. And for there to be a proper framework in place, proper foundations, then you could even propose these taxes. I'm sure the industry is willing. Of course, the industry wants to contribute. This is $1 trillion economy. So they definitely be glad to contribute to the economic prosperity of Nigeria, especially at the time where we need to boost our GDP and our earning. And over time it has improved. I mean, the results show this, that the technology space has contributed so much to what GDP has come into, not just Nigeria but all over Africa. And we have to just support this innovation and make sure we're able to, you know, get it to benefit the economy and also boost investment. So having this thing set up would only incentivize, small time crypto exchanges, the local players, from engaging in the market. I mean, we could have bigger exchanges being able to meet up some of these necessary requirements, the taxation provisions, which even though they are still on thread, I'm sure all this is just more of an attempt from KuCoin to stay compliant in some way and try to have regulatory engagement. There are very few number of exchanges that have actually gotten those licensing requirements that they put into place in 2022. So all of other things have to be addressed beyond just having a regulatory incubation program set up. Still after the end within a year, you're still requiring them to meet those requirements with those bogus amounts in this economy. So we need to go back and actually set things right, with the right foundations, basically, that we can have conversations around things like taxes and whatever. The industry will definitely willing to comply. Thank you.
Okay, so you spoke earlier about the lack of clarity in that space, and so far we've only seen KuCoin announce this move, and we haven't seen any official communication from the regulator to say we are now taxing crypto gains in Nigeria. So I don't know, do you think this could be like the first of many to come, or is basically, should we be expecting more crypto exchanges to come up with these updates or with these developments, basically informing their users that they would be charged 7.5% VAT on crypto trades?
Thank you very much for that. I think that's a question. But it would be only right for us to expect that other exchanges will want to follow suit, right? Because KuCoin as an exchange is a major international player. And they've been operating, in the space for a while. We know the recent issues that exchanges like Binance have had, within the ecosystem, right? It's only right that we expect other exchanges may want to follow suit. Though it's still going to be subject to whatever FIRS actually puts out there as a statement regarding, this implementation. Because now you see different regulators coming into the space. We have the SEC in now. The CBN came with its own. The NFIU too has, a couple of regulations already into place as well regarding monitoring and obligations. Now, FIRS has come into the picture, right? Now, I think all of these regulators need to come together and actually have a proper communication with the industry stakeholders and the major players in this space, right? Because I would not expect, which I know this is likely what it would do, is to have other exchanges also follow suit. They're actually addressing, you have to actually, more like ignoring the elephant in the room, right? So you have to address, these issues that have been there. If you just say, leave it, for all these exchanges to, make their own moves regarding whatever they would implement and that kind of thing, I would expect probably Coin have, had communications with FIRS before taking this step, and the likely probable fear of being subject to the same issues that Binance had in Nigeria, and they want to remain relevant within the ecosystem. They want to, you can see this is actually a step showing they want to be involved, but the regulatory clarity and uncertainty that is the void, really in the market is what has been making many of these players just take a step back a bit and engage selectively regarding how they, operate within this market. The willingness is there. And other exchanges may follow suit, but not just the best way to go about it without having proper statements out there regarding what it should be, what should apply, and actually making sure, they get stakeholder feedback, some of these introductions that they want to make. Because without the stakeholders actually being able to meet up this requirement, it's more like having, laws that, cannot govern, people. And, without there being effective laws in place, I mean, there
Yeah,
tends to be just chaos in whatever industry, sector, whatever country, that happens.
yeah, Olale, I noticed that you said many times in your response how the ecosystem is willing. They are not strong-headed. Whatever you ask them to do, they will be able to do. You said it in different ways, and I want us to close this conversation with this, the possible impact. Okay, say the government eventually puts in place what they're supposed to put in place, right? And they are able to like move forward with taxing gains from this digital asset, right? What do you feel would be the impact, either negative or positive, on the businesses, right? I'm talking about both global and local exchanges now, and also on the crypto ecosystem in general, which will also include the users, the people that trade crypto on this platform. So let's say everything ideally in place, and the government can go ahead to tax this digital asset. What do you feel will be the impact on business and the ecosystem?
All right. I think it will be positive, to be honest, overall, because based on the nature of the financial transactions, itself. I mean, you would expect the government and Nigeria as a whole, should benefit from the business activities that are ongoing, right? It is very clear, right? There are various stakeholder groups and self-regulating organizations that have been trying to actively engage with the government and the regulators, in particular. We have a number of them, CBAN, Econ, CDI, and a number of them operating, within the ecosystem. And they'll try, over time to resolve these issues, have a roundtable with them. And I think there are still outstanding issues. But for sure, over time, I believe it's going to be a good contributor to the economic prosperity of Nigeria, the GDP, and we have so many other countries that are making good revenue from some of these licensing fees that they charge some of players in the space within the ecosystem, and the taxes. But the taxes have to be reasonable, of course. And I'll take a cue from the example of South Africa, with the recently introduced regulations and licensing requirements within the ecosystem, which hundreds of exchanges and other players within the digital asset space, have been able to seek this licensing, and the government is benefiting actively and being able to monitor these exchanges, because you need those monitoring mechanisms. They are just necessary. Without those, I mean, you can't effectively regulate and implement whatever you ask without those mechanisms. And plugging into that is having them licensed and having them commit to operate within those regulatory guidelines that have been set in place. So overall, it's a positive, and we're hoping that they send the right foundation. That's very important. The right foundation before they go ahead to implement and have probably a referendum regarding what should apply, what reasonably applies, and how do you even collect these crypto taxes? Are you collecting it fiat? Are you collecting it crypto assets? I mean, if you're saying I cannot operate a bank account, right?
Exactly.
And that does like crypto transaction, and you want to tax me. So how do I pay? Should I send Bitcoin to the wallet of the FIRS to remit, my
FIRS as
taxes?
Bitcoin wallet.
Yeah, you have to. Some of these questions are just, they are questions. I think they are necessary, and with the right foundations, I don't think they will should be much of a challenge. But I mean, as we always, Nigeria is a very queer, ecosystem to operate in.
Yeah. So
So
Olale, I know
thank
that
you.
I said that's like the last question, but something just dropped in my mind now. If there are like best practices, like there are other parts of the world that digital assets have been successfully taxed. I don't know if you have an idea of that.
Yeah, I mean, a number of places, right? As you know, the number of jurisdictions where regulations have been introduced. I mean, the South Africa that I mentioned for one, is one of the few African countries that have regulations in place at this point. India as well introduced taxes at a point. I think sometime last year they proposed about 30%. The implementation of that so far. I mean, I don't know yet about the implementation of that so far, but 30% was introduced, and in Europe too as well, with the implementation of MICA, right? They're going to declare provisions and implementation around taxes. But what you will see when you consider all these jurisdictions and some of these examples and just laid down, I would notice that they have actual regulations. They have a system that is working. Everyone knows the rights and obligations that they have in place. And there are things that are attainable, right? That are not in a way rigid to the ecosystem, and purchase them, to act in a certain way against the regulators. And we've seen this, in so many other places that it work. We have Estonia as well, one of the greatest countries where innovation and a lot of companies are incorporating and are having their business activities out of there. So there are use cases. There are there are the cases that you can actually study for some of these jurisdictions, where you can actually understand how they've done it and how they are even able to monitor compliance. Because having laws into place without compliance, it all doesn't matter. Do not have those mechanisms ready.
In place.
So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Olaleye, for answering so gracefully.
To listen to the full episode of this podcast, visit podcast.techpoint.africa or search for Techpoint Africa Podcast on your favorite podcast platforms.